Welcome to another episode of the Office Altering Hire and Empower with Molly McGrath podcast. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. If you're a first-time listener, hopefully you'll become a long-time listener. As always, I'm your show host, Molly McGrath, founder of Hiring and Empowering Solutions and creator of this revolutionary podcast. You can check us out at hiringandempowering.com. All right, friends, welcome to another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. Holy moly, we are like at the halfway mark of the quote unquote new year. This is crazy. And as you can see, today's title, this is a good, great, amazing title. I am in Facebook groups constantly where people are talking about intake, sales, conversions, leads, all that jazz. And then when you talk to an attorney about it, their head's spinning and they don't even know the difference between a lead and a conversion or what have you, constantly bitching and moaning about, oh, I don't have any qualified leads or what have you. When we're like, yeah, you have lead. You don't have a lead generation problem. You have a lead conversion problem because your intake sucks. So I'm excited about today's guest. We have Jan Rus, founder of CaseFuel, brand new author of an extraordinary book, industry groundbreaking book called Beyond Intake. I have everything in the show notes here and the website for you, to LinkedIn, how to connect with Jan at his podcast, Law Firm Growth Podcast, the book to get your copy and to opt in, Beyond Intake book.com. All of his social channels here for you as well. But Jan, thank you. I know you are so incredibly passionate. You are the Facebook ad, webinar jam, workshop jam guy. And finally, somebody's talking about intake. So thank you for braving this storm on this soul sucking, yet inspiring topic, yet confusing topic.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for the awesome intro, Molly. And yeah, it's been quite a journey to say the least. But yeah, I think we're probably seeing some of the same things that led me to end up writing the book, because yeah, I think it's a big challenge and it's a very hard one to look at, honestly. So that's kind of why I ended up starting down this path.
And why do you think, what's your 2 cents on why it's such a challenge for law firms?
So the real reason is that I think that and this is kind of something I've been talking with people a little bit on my podcast a little bit. There's something unique within law firms. I think this is true of all business owners, but it's particularly true of attorneys, because attorneys are trained to be hyper-rational people. And there's this weird backdoor that rationality has when people want to be emotionally making a decision about something, but they use rationality as kind of an artifice to justify things that aren't quite as objective as they think they are, right? So kind of as you mentioned in the beginning, there's this whole thing that ended up coming up with the deployments that we were doing. And it's been pretty crazy. I was trying to run the numbers the other day. We've run over 250 firms through the webinar and seminar process since we ended up getting started these things. So it's a crazy sample size. And the thing that's wild, and I'm really proud to say this, the first client that we ever signed for the webinar stuff is still a client. And I wish everyone was that easy, but they were a fantastic firm. They were 7 figures. You kind of drop that firm into any lead source that we've had with them, and they've taken off like a rocket. But there was this gap between people like that and people that ended up going through the exact same process, having the exact same leads, and being given the exact same materials, and found a way to not make it work. And the more I looked at it, and I was killing myself for years, trying to build a better mousetrap to get things closer. So, improving webinars, media buying stuff, including the volume, and all this stuff kind of came to a head. This is a story I don't have in the book, and I don't think I've told this elsewhere, but we had a client in the end of last year. This was insane. So, we've just kind of been adding things to the product over the years. And one of the things we ended up adding for people who didn't have intake staff was got a call center, just, to help specifically with the webinar stuff. And we had a guy who had absolutely gangbusters results. He had something like 50 or 60 leads come in the first 2 weeks he ended up getting. And then we got to the point where this guy was booked literally 8 consultations were booked for him in a single day. And that guy, you'd want to say, I'd love to be telling you that this was the best success story that I've ever had. And from a numbers perspective, it was, to be honest. I wish I could say we do that all the time. But this guy found a way to not figure it out. And the truth is, underneath the tactics, there is mindset, and underneath the mindset, there is philosophy. And it's whether you believe that the quality of leads are something that is outside of you or within you. And the reason, to wrap up an extremely long question, an extremely long answer to extremely short question, is that it is much easier to fudge the numbers and think that something wasn't our fault, because to take responsibility for something is to not we'll have to get this. It's like, okay, so to take responsibility for something is scary, because that means you failed. But unfortunately, that's the only way that you can get better. And ultimately, the firms that were getting better are people who went through that journey. So in a long roundabout way, this book, among other things, is to provide process, but also the mindset to people get to that same level of being able to execute on whatever's put in front of them from a marketing perspective.
Wow. Wow. So how many law firms?
Yeah. So we're pushing 250 plus. And it's like, I mean, this is the thing, like our sales team does pretty good. Like, I think, we've got stuff coming in. Usually it's at this point, between me, you, and the wall, you're getting a couple new clients per week too. And again, it's like, we started the webinar funnel. I guess like the webinar product proper was like, I think we started advertising for that in like June of 2020, like deep COVID. So it's just kind of been a steady trickle since then.
Amazing. Amazing. So great results, getting leads, booked appointments, things of that nature. You and I both know that's not the story for every law firm, right? It's not the case in regards to getting leads in, what have you. But, I know you talk a lot in the book about redefining lead value. I'm constantly fighting with law firms, and I don't even do marketing, but I do support them with making certain their people, their process, their production, ultimately their profitability. And so when they're like, oh, I'm getting all these junky leads, what have you, I'm like, how do you know? Nobody's picking up the phone. Nobody's doing follow-up. The average person needs to see things 12 times. You don't have a lead nurture campaign. You're not hitting them with either email or blogs or newsletters or value add creation or what have you. Or do you even know, are you running a weekly follow-up focuser to see if your team is doing follow-up? I know you and I both have a mutual client. And this is why I'm like constantly on my soapbox about follow-up and going beyond intake and what have you. You and I have a mutual client, and the attorneys really had working their law firm part-time and really started working with you on webinars and getting the phone to ring, what have you. And it blew up. And called me, and she's like, oh my gosh, I need an intake person. I need a client service coordinator, whatever you call those things, Molly. And we're on our coaching calls to help get her client service coordinator onboarded. And the client service coordinator is like, oh my God, never worked in a law firm before. And doing the follow-up calls and the intake calls for these leads that are coming in after they watch the pre-recorded evergreen, I guess, webinar. And she's like, oh my gosh, like these people just need direction. Like she understands her role in intake to be that shepherd, to be that advocate for to get the calendar book. Because at the end of the day, that's what the attorneys need. You need to know how many appointments you need. You need to know what you want your conversion to be, so to speak, what you need your cash flow to look like. So I would love for you to just kind of speak into, because I know you do outsource intake as well, right?
Yeah, a little bit. So then the other thing too is like, I've always kind of looked at the outsourced intake thing that we do for clients. It's really just kind of for like a perfect spot. And like the situation that you described is like, that's a fantastic client. And I'd love to say her name, but I didn't ask her to, so I won't.
No.
But basically, it's a perfect situation. This is a solo. She was basically, she had a full-time job. She wasn't able to follow up on things on her own. So she had, basically part-time help that was just specifically just for calling the leads. And then when she got to the point where she could have that in-house staff. And, I'm super transparent about the fact that an in-house staff is always going to outperform something outsourced.
Yes,
even
sure.
when, like you and my team, I'll be honest about that. But yeah, that's kind of the perfect situation. But like, as far as the lead value thing too, like this is kind of one of the big sacred cows that I want to break in legal. And it's basically, if you wanted to get very real about how people are judging a lead's quality, it's whether they closed or not, which there are so many variables outside of that. So it's like, and there's this, the situation. I try to, like, this is one of the first chapters that I have in the book. It's just kind of like defining the like intrinsic value of a lead. So let's say on one hand, you've got somebody who's referred to you, and I'll just use estate planning because it's something we deal with a lot. They're looking to have an estate plan. They referred to you by somebody else. You have that consultation, you close, you're good to go. That's what most people would consider a fantastic lead. Although, there are people who say that was a bad referral if the referral doesn't close, but it's kind of hard to mess that up. Second category would be inbound calls. And those are also fine as well. The cool thing about inbound calls is that they've made a decision before they go for you. It's going to be a little harder than a referral. You're going to have to toot your own horn a little bit more. But still, if that's a person who has assets to protect, and that is a need that is unfulfilled, that is potential value for, if not your firm, another firm. The last thing, and this is, I think, the huge opportunity within legal, is basically the people that are not referred. They're not doing an inbound call. And there's a whole conversation we have about inbound calls and why that's getting less and less profitable and harder to do moving forward. But people that were going out to the market. And there's, we talk about estate planning a lot, but this exists in all practice areas. But basically, we've got people that have a need. They've expressed interest. Maybe it's not a going to a person that and getting referred to them, but that's still a person that needs to close. And the whole process of what the best firms do, which is what I've tried to get into the book, is how to take somebody from interest to qualification to getting onto your calendar and to finally closing, and just going step by step on that. And the thing that's kind of crazy is that, this is just another thing that always stuck in my head for years before I wrote the book. And like a lot of the stuff happening was just like, these are things, we've been running a coaching call for years at this point. I've had like so many clients through the program. And honestly, we probably learned more from the clients that didn't have stuff figured out. We've had to kind of like coach through those like sketchy moments. But when you kind of have those breakthroughs, you get to see how the principles really work. But like basically, the biggest firms were never concerned about lead quality. Like ever. We have, and it's like we've got and God bless this guy for getting on, former podcast guest Tom Boris. This guy makes a point of having on my coaching call all the time too. He closes 80-90%. His mentality on this is like, look, I'm the king. If you step into my to my courtroom, then I'm going to close you if you have a need. That's pretty much it. And this guy doesn't care whether the person was referred to him by his mom or whether, they walked in the street because a guy was spinning a sign outside of his office, right? It's like, if there's a need, that's it. Like, and that's really just again, this is something that takes people years. I think Tom, was doing this for 20 years before he got to that point, but it's process at the end of the day. That's really it. And if you can follow the right process and very importantly, avoid the blind spots that would stop you from finding the process, it's possible for all kinds of people to get ramped up on this stuff. And like, attorneys, but as well as the people that are managing this stuff from like a staff perspective. It's just like, and, to your point, Molly, it's like, the way that you get to having the bandwidth to leave a full-time job, get an office, hire staff. It's not having extra people to shuffle papers behind you. It's by getting more content on your calendar, and then obviously knowing how to close them and getting your numbers right for that. But it's math at the end of the day.
And it's math at the end of the day. I love that, and it's such a genius way to go about it in regards to. This was a side hustle. This is something I want to do. I want to get into estate planning, and we're not making it about this story, but I love it. The thing she was hyper focused on was intake and appointments. I need proof of concept. And this attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but really didn't even know a whole lot about estate planning law. like the law side of it. Now, knew about it, obviously, not without ethics, but like really understanding how to close people within it, had a government job, things of that nature. But what I loved about it, she's like, I want to serve people. I see a need for estate planning. I want it, but I need to be in front of people to be able to serve them. So she did the place of getting lead generation, then invested in intake coordinator, client service coordinators. Most law firms, and this just kind of coming to me, most law firms will be so production heavy, hiring attorneys, hiring paralegals, hiring all these positions, and then be freaking out because of all the money they're spending on marketing. And it's like, because they're white knuckling it because it has to cover the overhead that they have, to your point, in the paper department, in the production department, and what have you. And really, I still to this day, sitting here in 2023, when I talk about the value of investing in an intake coordinator, client service coordinator, chief happiness officer, whatever you want to call them, that like people scratch their heads about that. But then they'll spend a shit ton of money on marketing and lead generation, Facebook ads, LSAs, whatever they are, and then be mad at the marketing people because they don't have quote unquote conversions. It's like, well, there's so many more conversions before the conversion of called sale or close. Like, what about the 4 conversions that happen before sale or close, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like, this is the other thing too, because it's like, I used to have a different metaphor for this, but like, I think it's so important to have optics into what's going into that. So like, it's a huge thing about like what we try to define. So like, in the terms of the way that like we laid out the book, and this is what we've been using in CaseFuel for years. It's like, the fundamental steps that we need to get into contact. So we have to talk about contact rate. We talk about hooking the prospect. We talk about qualifying the prospect. And this is the only real qualification thing too. It's not whether we like them or they were for whatever, like that they close or not. Then we got to set a demo. They have to show to the demo, and then we finally close. But yeah, it's like people, I think the more steps are involved, and like, this is one of the thing too, because it's like, I had this crazy thing, and I don't know if I've told this story publicly, but I remember when I was working at an internship, I was like my sophomore year of college. And I was reading a bunch of books on sales, and like I was reading like Cialdini and stuff. I was just like, hey, I went to the guy who owned the company. I was just like, you guys have any sales stuff you can throw me on? Like, I'm really curious to see how that works. And like, that was a desire that I had as a weirdo. And I eventually wanted to use that for my business thing. But like, I like sales. I was always attracted to it, but I know that's not the case for everybody. And I feel like so much pain for the people that are in this situation. Like, there's fantastic attorneys that just, it's mystifying to them. Like, it's, if you look at somebody who can walk into a room with somebody that, again, and like, I'm not going to get into the position with like referrals, because like a lot of people are,
Right.
C plus closers that think they're, the stud of all studs. But going to somebody that they don't know and taking that person from cold all the way to a closed clients, it looks like absolute voodoo. But the truth is, it's step after step after step after step. And the unfortunate fact is that if you multiply any of those steps by 0, you're not getting the close. So we talk about these things like you either got the gift of gab or you don't. But the truth is, all of these things are processes, and all of these things can be focused on individually. And you can measure how these things are breaking or not. If you have a next step to take, you can expect a different outcome. And that's how you really own what ends up happening from the leads that you have.
I love the words that you use, cold to close. I love mystifying. I mean, in voodoo, I think it is definitely for attorneys by and large. And then they have other additional head trash, bar association, all the other things around marketing and ethics and what have you. Like, there's still some attorneys that, subscribe to that script, if you will, in their head, which is full of limiting beliefs. So the methodical process that you use in your own company, that you use with your own clients, what would you say are, like, for our listeners? And again, I highly recommend you go and download the book, get the process, get the way. What would you say are like your maybe top, 2, 3, 5 value bombs that you that today we know I mean, just the naming convention of your book, Beyond Intake, shooting through the roof. You're going to have every law firm in the country downloading this. But the kind of fast track cliff notes, what would you say? Maybe if there's one thing they could take away and implement today and go and back into their team after listening to us today, what would you say it would be that you would give as a value bomb?
Okay. I love this, Molly, and this is one of those. I try to get this super early in the book so everyone has it. And I do hope you get the book. But if you don't, you use this, then I hope you do some good with it. The biggest problem, bar none, in intake processes, especially ones that are going outside of referral and inbound calls, is contact rate. And this is a metric that I had never heard of until I got into business and started trying to figure this out myself. It's mostly used with call centers. But, it seems obvious to say out loud, but you're not going to be closing anyone that you don't speak to. And the issue that most law firms that we've worked with prior to working with us have is that they're not talking to anyone. So this is kind of the weird situation. You can absolutely see why. I mean, it's not fair, but the thing is, people project the worst things onto people they don't talk to. So one of the very interesting phenomena we'd see is like, these guys have no money. How many of you talked to? Zero. Okay, so where's the evidence? Like that's kind of a weird thing. But contact rate is one of the things that's super mechanical. It's super, like, I call it a hygiene thing. There's no skill involved. You just do it or you don't. It's like brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. When it comes to outbound, or when it comes to leads that are coming from a form fill, what you have to do, and this is going to sound, annoying, but if you want to make money, this is what you got to do. You got to call them within 5 minutes. I'm not the first person to say this. There's a really, really well-cited study that was done by Wharton that illustrated this. And then just, in our own practice doing this with clients, we used to recommend a day, then we did an hour, then 5 minutes. And the possibility of that person picking up within that window goes up so dramatically. And now you're talking to people. Even if you're not having the conversations you want to have, you're talking to people. And it's the first step, but it's like, the thing is, people don't even get there. Because, I mean, to your point, like about as far as like limiting beliefs and stuff, my honest thought is that if you have all the training in the world, if you have everything available to you, you can still find a way to not make things work. On the flip side, if you have a situation where the motivation is big enough, people will find a way. And, it obviously helps to have process. But the thing is, it's such an easy way to just not open the door and write off a channel to say I didn't contact them, when it's something that's within everyone's power at all times, which is crazy. So the number one thing I would say is that if you're going to be investing into stuff that's not an inbound call, run your ads at a time where you can pick it up. Make sure that stuff's staffed. Make sure it's a priority. The second thing, and this is going to sound pretty crazy, but this has been absolutely game changing as far as this again, we're talking about contact rate, pickup rate, this kind of stuff. The issue that we have with this in society, and this is something that's been going on, like there's like a lot of stuff that's happening as far as like the FTC. Everyone gets spam calls. I get spam calls like all the time too. Spam calls can't dial twice, and spam calls are usually not dying from a local area code. So, and there's, it's, as far as the situation, and by the way, no, this is not solicitation. If this is somebody who's coming in from an opted ad, check your bar, it's going to check out. But if you dial that person once, you got to dial them twice, because the second time, when people see something that's coming from an area code that is calling twice, one, that says it's not a spam call. Two, you're like, who's trying to get in touch with me? Like, is something going on my kid's daycare? Did I forget something at the gym? Like, but people answer it. And again, combined with the 5-minute opt-in callback, now we have the little toe in the door that we need to start a conversation. And then basically it's also top of mind there. Like, don't double dial people 48 days after you got the lead. But if you say, hey, you opted into our guide on how to get more time with your child, does that ring a bell? Boom, you're in the conversation. And so many people don't even get that far. But the other thing too is that it's just like, it's hard to work through, but it's like, I kind of feel like a lot of this stuff too, and like, it's kind of like, it's like whatever, it's like brisket or chitlins or something like that. This is considered like garbage stuff, but there's people who are doing brilliant things and making so much money with this stuff now that might be considered a little beneath people or a little more work or a little forward. But like, going back to the intrinsic value, these people have needs. And if they didn't, they wouldn't be contacting your firm or responding to your marketing. So yeah, it's just this, it's been such an unlock. And like, it really has been game changer for stuff that we've had. And I'm just like, so excited to be able to share this with more people.
I love this. So call within 5 minutes. Again, another reason to invest in having an intake coordinator, client service coordinator. I couldn't agree more with that. I had learned that early on as well. And it's people are like, oh my goodness, especially in this day and age. Just when I ran a sales team back in, I don't know, 2015. And we would say that the lead would come in and immediately pick up the phone. And they're like, that is so crazy, creepy, cool. Like that you just called me. They're fascinated by it. They're totally impressed that you have a process. They're absolutely impressed that you really care about people enough. Like it takes a lot of courage and effort to download your, do we put mom in the nursing home or what have you? Obviously you have a need. How can we serve? How can we help? I love that. And the second thing, I didn't realize it, but the spam calls don't dial twice. That's the theme I'm taking. And for all the attorneys listening, write that down. Like call within 5 minutes and then the spam call doesn't call twice. So are you saying call and then hang up and then call immediately after, or what's your take there?
Yeah, it's only if they don't pick up. So a lot of people will pick up. It depends on the market too. Like, a lot of times if you see older people, they're a little bit more likely to pick up. I find people in more rural areas are a little bit more likely to pick up on the first call. But if they don't pick up on the first call, dial a second time. I always say, like, if it's worth dialing them once, it's worth dialing them twice. 3 times might be a stretch, but like, do the double dial whenever you're calling somebody that is not expecting a call.
Okay, great. Form fill, you use this word. I just want to clarify and verify for our attorneys that might not know what you mean by the word term form fill. Can you say more about that? Do you mean they're downloading your whatever PDF on your website, that they're opting in and registering for your workshop, webinar, seminar, whatever term of art people resonate with?
Yeah. Okay. So really, really good question. So basically, I kind of like the way that I split up. So we got referrals, we got inbound calls, and we have form fills. So the thing is that I kept it very open on the marketing side with what can lead to this, because there's a lot of different things. I can tell you, if you're listening to this podcast and you have a website, you got a form fill. It's on your website. It's the contact us form. Go get a phone number on that if you don't. And but like I think there's this whole universe of marketing stuff that I think honestly is getting a little bit underutilized. But the lead magnet stuff that's been going on for decades plus at this point. A lot of times people, and like where I've kind of seen this, and this is more of a marketing opinion. I don't talk about this in the book at all, but it's just just kind of like riff on this for a bit. The form fill strategy, I think, has been kind of unfairly maligned because it hasn't resulted in booked calls. Now, the thing is that if we add a number to that, that allows you to take, you could play offense on this, use a beyond intake process, and be able to get into touch with these people. The alternative that people have, and again, there's a lot of money trying to convince people from the practice management softwares and the copywriters and the this and the CRMs and the this and the that into telling you that you can have a set it and forget it situation. And the thing is you can, but the problem is the efficiency is not really great. So, you could probably get a phone call, you could get a consultation booked a week on a mailing list of maybe 500 or 1,000 people. And I don't think people should stop doing that if they have it, but like the efficiency with calling people, just to throw some numbers out there, right? Contact rate should be at least 50%. We've seen some like locations get as high as 80%. You should be getting about 50% of the people that you pick up to book. So 25% in terms of like, if you're following all the processes, there's a number you should be able to trip over. So, 4 leads or 100 leads, depending on how you're paying for those, it could make a huge difference in the return on investment. But at the same time too, it's like, this is kind of the dark truth about the inbound stuff is that it's a very limited pool. There really have not been any major innovations. Like the biggest thing that's happened as far as the inbound calls in the last couple of years have been LSAs. And I love LSAs, but you guys saw this happening if you were there from the start. Personal injury calls were $20, and then 6 months later they were $200. Because it's a limited pool, there's more and more people trying to compete on this. The information is easier to find, and unfortunately, the secret's out. So it works, but it's just more expensive to happen. So form fills are like all these new networks, all these innovations. Like, you see people that are putting content out on TikTok or Facebook or YouTube or whatever ends up being the new thing down the line. There's like all of the new inventory that's being made in the ad space is being made in channels that will respond to a form fill. And it really kind of from a marketing perspective goes from the inbound to the outbound, right? A pull marketing versus a push marketing. And the fortunate truth, like I started out as an AdWords guy. Like the pull marketing works, but it's easy. Like you're not competing on skill, you're competing on budget with that stuff. That's the unfortunate truth. Like, you want to crush it on a, an AdWords ad, you go, best Philadelphia personal injury lawyer, verdicts of 67 million. Like, it's like, you don't have to be like Eugene Schwartz to make that to work. But to be able to capture somebody's attention, that takes thought, that takes understanding your avatar, that takes creativity, but that's why it's so open for people. And the other thing is that because it's harder, it's more unique. You don't need to be one of 400 firms competing for your practice area in your city. You can be the guy who does immigration for people in the Muslim community in your city. You can be the gal who's doing adoption rights for LGBT families, or whatever, right? Or you could you could be the dementia guy, like all these different things. So it's like the possibilities open up so tremendously when you have this mechanism in place. But yeah, it's like you just have to make sure that you can do something with this, because otherwise it's like the whole marketing efforts for naught, right? It's like if you can't get things on the calendar, like what are you going to do? And I know there's people who have made brilliant lead magnets that have gone nowhere because there was either too much faith being put on people beating a path to their door, but like just the space that exists in capturing that moment where you've gotten their attention and converting that into just to the next step, which is just getting them on the phone. That's where the magic happens.
That's where the magic happens. I love that you said that, the lead form, and you just hit something just really, really quick. You have this beautiful PDF download, this beautiful ebook, whatever it might be, but then the lead form has 17 different fields in it. And it's taking, you want their first name, last name, address, zip code, all that. It's like, no, you want their first name, last name, phone number, that maybe email. That's it. Like, and I see so often, where myself included, where I'll either go to law firms or even just anywhere where there's a form fill. And my goodness, this is like some of the law firms that use 17-page personal information forms.
Yeah. And it's like, I think
the barrier of entry is too much, especially if people are on mobile or they click on your thing and they're sitting, they're waiting in parent pickup and the kid's coming out or what have you. And they're like, I have about 10 seconds to fill this out. That's it.
Well, and it's interesting too, because it's like one of these situations, I came to this conclusion a little while ago. It's like, I think the fundamental, when like we're ever talking with clients about decisions and why we do things one way or another way, or like we're exploring different decisions with clients or just comparing what the merits of funnel X versus funnel Y or whatever, I think everything can be categorized in terms of friction. So with this, like, the example you put out, Molly, it's like if you have somebody who's got 17 form fills, they're one of 20 results on the first page of Google. Then somebody goes, okay, well, the friction's too high, juice does not work the squeeze, I'm going to the next thing. On the flip side, there are times where friction does make sense. The thing is that friction will generally lower the volume, but increase the likelihood that the person's, but it's not because of anything that's happening to the lead. It's basically just that like that person had to be a little bit more desperate to go through all the BS that you're putting in front of them. And I actually advocate, when you get to the point where your numbers work out, there's time to introduce friction. Like I'll give you an example we're going on right now. Like we have people, we're just looking for name, email, phone number for the stuff that I do B2B for CaseFuel. But, we're introducing a survey now. So it's like, you got to play 20 questions before we're getting on this calendar. And that's something I wouldn't do if, there was cobwebs on our phone, but like, as you get to the point where your business is overwhelmed, you can either build capacity or you can tighten things up. And maybe that's a good direction, but you don't get the option to choose until you close the loop and you have things working, which is a point that I wish more people would get to.
Oh my goodness, I love that. You're absolutely right. And being knowing your numbers, knowing your conversions, and then, like you said, then you tighten things up where it's not quantity, it's quality, and where you are putting the kind of gatekeepers there for only people that are serious about getting on a call with you. They'll appreciate it more. The quality of questions that you put on your application intake survey, whatever it might be. I love that you just added that second piece, because there are a lot of listeners that are at that point and where you will say, okay, great, now let's tighten it up. Tell our listeners the best way to get a copy of your book. Congratulations.
Okay, awesome. So basically, we've got the domain beyondintakebook.com. So go there and you can go ahead and grab a copy. So it's going to be a cart page, basically just like anything else.
Yep.
I'll also say this too: if you there might be some processes outlined in the book that you'll become subject to if you opt in for the book. So there's always kind of, I always think it's fun too, because it's like, and I buy stuff from other marketers all the time too, because it's kind of cool too. You get to see the situation. I'm not going to be harassing everyone that puts in their phone number. If there's a phone number field, just you'll probably know what's going to happen though. But that's kind of the situation, right? So it's like there's sometimes I learn as much from watching what people do as I do from actually consuming the content there too. So it's always going to be fun. Anyways, I hope you'll have fun. But either way, yeah, it's like, I think, I really try to, put a lot of blood on the pages. Like, we're not really holding anything back in terms of what works. I hope that this, like my goal with this, and like, this is the second book I've written. I think the first one I did kind of want to make a name for myself, which is whatever. But this one, it's not about getting awareness for me or my company. My real goal with this is to create businesses that have a command on this, because the more law firms that are doing this, the more people that are empowered, the better work that's going to be done. Like, this is my take on the access to legal thing, right? Firms aren't growing if they're not making money, and they're not making money if they're not getting the most out of their marketing. And it's like, I just hate to see a world where everyone's, kind of waiting with their cup in hand, waiting for the next referral to come through, or getting slaughtered in their, the Google ads auction, or, getting sold some $10,000 program on how to go, beg for referrals with extra steps. So, there's a third way. It takes a little bit of elbow grease. I'll be the first person to say it, but it works if you do the work, honestly. So, I hope people take it and make something with it. So that's my big goal.
Yep. And there's a desire, there's interest, because I saw a Facebook group where you said, hey, anybody want to get a free copy of my book? Meaning before you published it, you want to read the first shot manuscript. And I think I saw you post there, and within minutes there were like 79 people that wanted a copy. I'm like, okay, I guess you hit a nail here. I guess there's some interest. So thank you. And I love that you said it's not about where it's a passion project. It is about making a difference for law firms, for them to have the secret sauce, to have the recipe of formula. And I love what you just said, and then I'll end it here. It works if you do the work. I love that.
Yeah. No, and it's the truth too, because it's like, it starts with believing that it's possible. It continues with doing it. And look, it's like people get tested with this. It's like, it's so crazy watching people go on these journeys, because it's not like you just kind of figure it out once it happens. It's like, look, you're going to get the situation where somebody picks up and calls you an a-hole. You're going to get a situation where somebody no-shows in a client. And then like, you're going to have the moment to say, well, was that something that I can get around, or is everything else the problem? And again, like, this is the thing, like, that's a much harder problem to solve. And, that might be a job for a therapist and not for me. But I think if we provide as much process as possible, people will at least have the option to have something to implement. So that's the goal at the end of the day.
Oh, thank you for being our guest. Thank you for pouring your heart and soul into this body of work. Absolutely incredible, necessary. And I'm excited that I don't have to have this conversation again with another law firm, because it's not my wheelhouse, and I'm just going to send them right to your page to get a copy of the book. And it works if you do the work, and I'm going to leave it there. So Jan, thank you as always, buddy. I'm so incredibly grateful and thankful for you and the work that you are doing in the legal community.
Okay. Thank you so much, Molly. It's been always a pleasure to chat.
Yes. All right. Until next time, get out there. Client service coordinators, intake coordinators, if you're listening to this, share this with your attorney, get a copy of the book and tell them to move out of the way and let you work the leads and phones. We've reached the end of yet another episode of the Hire and Empower with Molly McGrath podcast, where dream teams of entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur's world really do come true. Listen, whether you're a business owner, employee, executive, or hiring manager, we fully understand hiring, onboarding, and leadership is expensive, exhausting, often overwhelming, and absolutely time-consuming for the already taxed professional. Well, we have your back on all fronts. For 25 years and counting, we have transformed over 4,000 law firm teams into the most efficient, resourceful, and profitable asset of your business. Check out our Smart Hire solution, our employee leadership program, and the 66-day law firm turnaround at hiringandempowering.com.